Welcome to A Mason's Work, the podcast where we review Masonic symbols and illustrate how they can be used to solve problems in everyday life. With your host, Brian Mattox, a proud member of the Craftsman Online Media Network.
So we talked a little bit yesterday about the idea of commiseration as a kind of a mechanism by which we spread salt or corrosive ideas or corrosive behavior that undermines the health and safety of a group. It lowers trust. It has all sorts of negative consequences. And another one of those behaviors is what we're going to talk about today, and that is the judgment of people. Now, I want to be clear, right? Our minds are judgment engines. They are decision-making machines. So it is constantly doing an evaluative process. Your brain just does this automatically. It comes from old biological sort of roots where it's fight or flight or self-defense. So turning the mechanism itself off is not the goal. Having the mechanism be the driver of your behavior is what we're trying to kind of reduce, right? We're trying to reduce that influence so that you don't talk about people behind their back. This kind of judgment of people that turns into gossiping and kind of just awkward, uncomfortable behavior is part of a kind of a process that most people will have at some point in their lives. Now, you may have left that process a long time ago. You may still be struggling with it, but the process is this. When I am looking around and I feel in some way insecure as a person or uncomfortable, what I need to do to make myself feel better is to take everyone else down a peg or two or three or 10. We have syndromes for this. Casually, you'll know it. A lot of guys refer to it as like the Napoleon complex or things like that, where Napoleon, who actually historically was not overly short, but was perceived historically to be a shorter guy. And so they created this complex about him because he was short. He essentially was angry about that and tried to take over the world, and really tried to make it everybody else's problem. You'll see kind of, demonstrations of this. It has really nothing to do with being short and has everything to do with feeling inadequate in some way. So if you find yourself in a situation where you feel inadequate, and the very first kind of thing you do is you start to point fingers at the other people in the world, that's the beginning of a process that you want to really be mindful of, because you're judging people and not outcomes. When we do this sort of over time, you essentially start creating stereotypes and all sorts of behavioral patterns that you identify as what are effectively things that you yourself don't do, but maybe wish you did or had the capacity to do. And then you label those as essentially traits or characteristics of somebody that you don't like. And so you'll talk negatively about them, like, oh, that person is, maybe overly compassionate or empathetic to a fault, or they are, too much of a hard ass, or whatever the language you're going to use to judge the person and not the behavior. So what does it look like then to essentially flip that on its head and talk about behavior? I don't like the way this project was handled. I think we could have taken a different direction at this point in the process. Or, in this situation, I think the outcomes we were driving to weren't well established. When we change our language to looking at the situation or looking at the problem instead of the people involved in the problem, you get the beginning of a seed of action that you can take. You turn that salt into essentially fertile territory for conversation so that you can build a relationship from that adversity or from that situation, as opposed to making more sort of enemies and bad people and a situation where effectively, you have to, when somebody's behavior doesn't align to the standard, like, so when you have a situation where you've got somebody, you've now demonized them for years because of the way you don't like the way they look or the way they act or the way they behave, when they do when they have a behavior that doesn't align to your story you've created about them, you now have a meaningful problem. You have to find a way to spin that behavior, to turn it into something evil, to align to the fact that you think this person's a jerk. And so judging people in this way and talking about people in this kind of hierarchical way starts to become a meaningful problem and is a foundational way that a lot of folks use to spread the salt or spread poison in their community. So let's talk about outcomes and move away from the people discussion. We'll get into some more tomorrow.
The views represented in this podcast are those of the speaker alone and are not representative of any grand or subordinate lodge.
Hi, Brian here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any suggestions or guidance for further episodes you'd like to see or hear, whatever the case may be, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at masonswork.com, and we will try and incorporate your suggestions into a future recording. Thanks.
Freemasonry teaches us that the true work is within, a lifelong journey of reflection, discipline, and discovery. At A Mason's Work, we help Masons bring out their best selves through meaningful self-inquiry and symbolic practice. From personal reflection to lodge engagement, we offer tools that turn symbols into action. Visit us at amasonswork.com. The work is within. The time is now.